So you're saying smells are episodic also?
Yes, yes. Smell and taste are linked directly together. And so the great thing about that, the powerful thing about it, is that the same nerve synapses that process your emotions process smell and taste. So it's a very powerful memory area. But because of that, I think is why taste and aroma, for that matter, were considered less of the higher senses, because it's an emotive, immediate emotive response. The other thing, there's some argument that, especially when it comes to smell, we actually had, in order for civilization to occur, we had to stifle our sense of smell. Cities smell bad, right? Disease smells bad. And if you think about it, why do we smell and taste? What's the purpose of smelling and tasting? Does anyone have an idea what it might be? Pretty simple. It's a safety thing. It's bad smells, bad taste equal death. Good smells, good taste, that's safe, right? So it's really a safety function than anything else. This idea of before, and it's actually kind of part about what when it comes on to coffee, when you ask a person, well, what do you like? Usually we don't think about what we like in taste. What we're mostly concerned, what we're conditioned to be concerned about, is what we don't like. Because that's, evolutionarily speaking, that's what keeps us alive, right? But as modern people, there's not a lot of things out there that are threatening to kill us. And that's kind of the same thing when we talk about, if you ask an average person what they like in coffee, they'll say, well, I don't like bitter, or I don't like acidity. We're going to be able to talk about what we don't like much easier than what we do like. I mean, certainly we like sweet, right? But we're not talking about, in the case of sugar. We like sweet, and we like that fatty tastes, right? And that's again conditioned evolutionarily, right? Sweet and fat, that's what gets you going, right? So when we're talking about moving into good taste, what tastes good, that's much harder to define. Right? It becomes quite subjective when we start getting in this area, particularly since most of our nerve synapses, or most of our the genomes that process smell and aroma, particularly in taste, are turned off. 2/3 of them are turned off. So essentially when we're learning when we're cupping, we're learning how to taste. We're turning on those switches again. That's what we're trying to do. And that's what we're ultimately trying to do in this exercise, is to get you thinking about taste, discerning about taste. What am I tasting? So we're not going to be interested at this point what tastes good. We're only going to be interested in what are we tasting. And this is why we start with the taste that we experience on our tongue. Okay, you've probably been long familiar with the 4 taste sensations that your tongue perceives, right? They're sweet, salty, sour, and bitter. And now there's another one that they talk about, the kind of savory, but it's kind of a controversial one. It's come about through MSG, but we're not going to be concerned ourselves with that. We're mostly going to be concerned about the primary ones: sweet, salty, sour, and bitter. Now, bitter is one of those taste characteristics that signal to our brain danger. Bitter means bad, right? But we as civilized people have learned that bitter ain't so bad, and there's some good bitters. Bitters in coffee. All coffee is a bitter product. Chocolate is kind of have a bitter characteristic to it, but we've learned to accept certain types of bitters. When we talk about beers, there's particular types of herbs and salads, right? The ones that are prized are these ones that add a bitterness to it, right? Otherwise, it just has a bland characteristic to it. It's not enjoyable. So in this case, bitter isn't necessarily a negative characteristic, because we know there's going to be a level of bitterness that all coffee has. Right? Now you can have excessive bitterness, and that's when we decide, oh, okay, that was just too bitter. But what we want to focus on is the other three sensations. Among the things that we're doing differently when we're cupping, if you ever get like say the Specialty Coffee Association's cupping manual that tells you how to go about doing cupping, they'll tell you to grind the coffee fairly coarse, and then what you'll do is you swish it on and pour it off. I find it's much easier to go ahead and do a fine, almost an espresso grind, and I push the grinds down to the bottom. It's a little simpler, and there's another reason why I do that. When I am searching for coffees, as y'all know, I'll cup the coffee hot, and then I'll cup the coffee several hours later when it's cold. And what I'm trying to do is force any type of bad flavors to the fore. And if that coffee turns on me during that process, I'll kick it back out again. So right now I'm just kind of pushing these grounds down. I'm not going to worry about rinsing the spoon between these two cups. These two cups have the same amount of coffee in them. I'm just going to rinse the spoon between the different coffees. Now a lot of times what I'll do is I'll, depending on where we are, I try to get this part taken care of. This grinding and brewing the coffees obviously is the most time consuming as we're going through. But at the same time, I don't want to do it so far in advance that the coffees get too cool. Ideal tasting temperature is body temperature. That's what we're kind of going for. Now, the initial time when we first start going around, the coffee is going to be certainly much warmer than a body temperature, but it cools rather rapidly, so you don't have to be too overly concerned about that. So if you're long-winded like myself, you can, you're talking into coolness kind of a thing. And that's the main thing is you want to make sure that you taste it first, so you know what's going on before you start having other people. The last thing you want to do is burn somebody's palate, then they're just done for. You remember your taste sensations, the sweet, salty, sour, and bitter. We're going to kind of dive into that part first. I've set up a few little clipboards for you. The first thing that's I find it really helpful in these situations that we write things down. Okay, so go ahead and grab a pen. There's a group of brochures on that clipboard. Go ahead and open up. Just pull them all out for a moment, and we'll just kind of briefly talk about them. The first one is cupping coffee, and that's really the one we're going to be using today. We'll go through, we'll write down what we're cupping and then the taste sensations, because it's easy to get kind of confused afterwards. We're going to be, because there's so many coffees here, you're going to go, what was that one? What was that one? So this will be a little helpful reminder for you from there. And on the back side it just says, how do you do this? Okay, but so we'll be working with that one. The ones that are going to be most important for you, especially later, what we'll be talking about is these first two: describing coffee's flavor, and actually our brochure with coffee descriptions. And this describing coffee's flavor is talking about, just as what I just introduced to you, this concept of body, taste, and aroma, right? And it defines those things. So body is the thickness, the viscosity of that coffee flavor on your palate, right? It's how literally heavy it feels. And a coffee can be anywhere from light-bodied, medium-bodied, heavy-bodied. It can be light to medium, medium-light. Think of like when you're cooking a steak, right? You have rare, medium, and well done. Similarly, you have those gauges all in between. It's a little hard right away to pick that out, but as we go along, you're going to find that when you first go around this table, it's all going to taste the same. But about midway through, all of a sudden, every single coffee is going to be hugely different, right? So, but body is not going to stand out to you right off the bat. What we will be going for is taste. So, and as it says in here, there's the four taste sensations that your tongue perceives. We're going to mostly be considering the three: sweet, salty, and sour. And when we're describing sweet coffees, we're going to be using the word sweet. Works well. We're not talking about the actual taste of sweet. We're talking about the taste sensation of sweet. And the taste sensation of salty and the taste sensation of sour. Okay, so this is going to be a critical thing that we'll get into.